I don't know that there's a good spot to do this. I thought it was 25,000. It's 28,872.
We've got a landmark court case. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got the BC Supreme Court ruling that First Nations, a bunch of them all together, sued, and they're being given back over 1,800 acres of land in Richmond. This includes major business warehouses like Amazon and IKEA. This includes a bunch of houses. This is insane. Let's jump into this. Here we go. This is the bombshell news coming out. This was just released yesterday by the BC Supreme Court declaring Aboriginal title over land in Richmond, including private property. If this stands, it has massive implications for private property across BC. Because what happened here is multiple First Nations got together and sued, and then this can set a precedent. Other First Nations can get together and sue and then just take back all of the land. There's going to be a civil war in this country if this keeps happening. FYI, guys, this court case is so complicated. I've spent many hours here trying to break this down because I see people in the comments, most people not figuring out what's going on, not really know what's going on. So you can see what she's highlighted here. Cowichan's Aboriginal title burdens the land over which the Crown grants the fee simple interest were issued. So fee simple interest is your land title. It's a free title. It's owning land. I find that Cowichan's Aboriginal title, which is grounded in the prior occupation of Cowichan's ancestors and the constitutional protected interest in land, is a senior interest in land via the fee simple titles which derive from Crown grants. You see, it's complicated when you're reading it like that. It's all legal speak. So let me break this down. First off, the document itself here, I'll just make it big so you can see. This thing is long. There's a lot of information in here. So we're obviously not going to go through all of this because there's too much, but hundreds of pages. So simply put, this is what we're talking about here. This is the land. So the pink area here, this is on Lulu Island in Richmond. First Nations won in court this area. Now there's a much bigger area, which I'll show you. But so first off, this green line here was their traditional hunting, gathering, outer boundary. At least that was recognized by the court, but they didn't win this area. That is the broader traditional territory where the Cowichan historically fished, gathered, and lived seasonally. This includes marshes, berry patches, reed beads, etc. Now what they did win is this pink patch here, this 1,846 acres of land where they were settled. They had a part-time home there in the summer. I went through the painstaking process of mapping this on Google Earth so we can see exactly. So what happened here, there's 4 tribes involved in this lawsuit: the Cowichan, Stumnunis First Nations, Penelkut tribe, and Halat First Nation. So all 4 of them got together and sued. Now traditionally what would happen is they would go over to Vancouver Island and also to the Gulf Islands here. They would stay around in these areas and fish in these areas in the winter. In the summertime, they would move back over here. They go up the Fraser River and they had a village right here. So that's why this comes into play. Now the village that used to be here is this Toktunas. So the 4 First Nations tribes got together. They sued the government saying, we didn't make a land deal, we want our land back, and that's exactly what happened. These tribes would come over here in the summertime where they fished for salmon, harvested resources, and lived in permanent beam houses. The plaintiff established that the Cowichan sufficiently occupied, exclusively used part of the claim area, which is what we're talking about here, the Cowichan title lands, and adjacent submerged lands before the British sovereignty in 1846. So the submerged land would be this area here because Lulu Island is essentially technically underwater, Richmond. It's lower than sea level, believe it or not. Governor James Douglas's promise in 1853 to treat the Cowichan with justice engaged the honor of the Crown. The court found that colonial authorities knew that Tilquintus was an indigenous settlement, but still sold the land to settlers without creating a reserve starting in 1859. Most Crown grants of fee simple titles, land titles, issued between 1871 and 1914 lacked statutory and constitutional authority because terms of union required the province to appropriate Indian settlements for reserve creation. So no reserve was created, and now they're saying we want our land back, and that is what they got. They got this land back. So technically, First Nations now owns all of this land. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, but the Crown grants and later vesting of the title of Richmond severely impeded the Cowichan's access to their village and fishery to constitute unjustified infringements of the Aboriginal title. The Cowichan also established an Aboriginal right to fish the south arm of the Fraser River for food, a practice that was integral to their culture agriculture and not dependent on permission from other Indigenous groups. The court's declarations are recognition of title, the Cowichan, based on Section 35, Part 1 of the Constitutional Act of 1982. They are now the owners of this land. Invalidity of titles except for Canada's interest in a small area related to Vancouver Airport fuel delivery project, which I believe is down here. This is an airport fuel facility, and Richmond's fee simple titles and Cowichan title lands are defective and invalid. So throughout this document here, it always says defective and invalid regarding the title of land. And that goes for all these businesses here. We'll get to them in a second. Canada must negotiate in good faith to reconcile its fee simple interests, the land title, in the fuel delivery lands with the Cowichan's title. And British Columbia must negotiate to reconcile Crown granted interest held by third parties and the vested highway lands with the Cowichan's title. So basically what's happened here is there's 18 months now where First Nations and the Crown will negotiate what happens here. Because technically, based on the law, they've given this back to First Nations, but you have a bunch of companies here that own this stuff, like UPS Supply Chain Solutions, Toyo Tires Canada, Think Logistics, CDS Group for Companies, Bunzel Vancouver, Tech Data Canada, FBS Food Processing Solutions Corporation. So some sort of deal has to be made, whether that's giving more money to First Nations, and I ran this through AI already, how much these 4 First Nations that are involved in this lawsuit, AI seems to think based on all the numbers throughout history since the mid 1850s that they've gotten between 1.9 and 2.3 billion dollars of taxpayer money. So kindly, I'm trying to stay neutral, but how dare you? They've gotten so much money and they're coming to steal our land back. And number 5, the fishing rights. So the Cowichan have an Aboriginal right to fish the south arm of the Fraser River for food. So this is what the court ruled. Now, if we look at this blue line, this is their traditional foraging, hunting lands. First Nations were saying the area was much bigger. It was actually going out to Annacis Island. The area that they're trying to steal back from taxpayers was something like this. It was much, much bigger. I don't know if it went on the south side, but it was something like this. The court said that the titles trace back to the Crown grants made without proper constitutional authorities, so they are legally defective and infringe on Cowichan's Aboriginal title. So it just keeps saying that this infringes on it, and this is now Cowichan land. So if we take a look what else is in here, look at all these different companies. These are all logistics, tech companies, T-Force Logistics, Siva, Automotive Finance Corp, Richmond Public Auction, Paints Beyond Auto Body, Key West Auto Carriers, Commercial Logistics. We've got an Amazon Fulfillment Center right here. We've got Archway Warehouse, DT Tire, Tire Link, KLT Transport, EuroAsia Transload, business after business after business. There's also an IKEA Distribution Services building here as well. So most of these are commercial properties. After digging into this, there are in fact 137 homes in here as well, which technically belong to First Nations now. And you might be wondering what happens if you sell this and all that. We'll get to that in a second. It's not good. So looking at the bottom corner of this land here, and I'll just show you this map just so you can see. It was painstaking to map this out, but we're talking about this section here. This orange colored stuff is where they had their homes built right on the river, their bean structure houses, their docks and all that kind of stuff. And this was more of their extended land. So we look at this section down here and this one down here, that's what this is here. And zooming in on this, there's 2 houses right here. Now, I don't know what's happened to this here. They've turned this into some sort of car parking lot. Maybe this is some sort of dealership or something that's leased out this land or whatever. But there are, in fact, 2 houses here, this one and this one. There's also an entire community here called Riverport Flats, which you can see there, these apartments. Switching over to Google Maps here for a second so you can see what these look like. So these are the Riverport Flats. So technically, First Nations now owns all of these. So if you own one of these, I'm sorry. Sincerely, I'm sorry, because this would be an awful experience now. Because when it comes to selling these things now, good luck. If anyone who owns one of those businesses, good luck. So this community here has 135 houses. And as I pointed out before, these 2 houses here, that makes it 137. It's kind of interesting too. If you drop this street view right here and you look at this house, it's blurred out. I don't know why Google's got this house blurred out, but you can't see it. There's the other house there. So you look back, it's still blurred out. And there's no cars back here. So you can see this was farmland, and for whatever reason, they signed a deal or something and put a bunch of cars in there. But so what happens with all these businesses now? Well, based on the law, if any one of these companies or any one of those homeowners wants to sell their business or their house now, their land, for example, say Toyo Tires wants to sell their business, the buyer coming in has to acknowledge and take it subject to Cowichan's Aboriginal title and the fact that the court has declared the Crown grants invalid could seriously affect market value and financing. So basically, anyone selling any of these businesses or these homes down here has to recognize that their title to the land is invalid and that First Nations owns this, and a deal will be worked out in the next 18 months. Good luck with that. Nobody's going to want to buy into this nonsense. I feel for anyone involved in this draconian crap show that's going on here. And because they won this, now we're going to see other First Nations trying to steal back Canadians' land. You know what the dumbest part about this is? This all came about from 1846. There's no one alive from back then. They're all dead. All of them. There's not one person left from that time. Things change. Cultures change, nations get conquered, things happen. You don't see the Roman Empire doing land acknowledgements, all these European countries that took over them and took them back over and all this stuff. There's no land acknowledgements, all that nonsense, because history happens. This is back from 150 years ago. You can't just come back and say, you know what, I'm going to take all of that back. And thank you, Amazon, for the infrastructure here. Now we have a nice big multi-million-dollar facility. What a joke. They get upwards of $2.3 billion in taxpayer funds and then steal the land back with improvements. This is an absolute crock of crap. Sorry, I was trying to stay neutral. I can't stay neutral. This is ridiculous. What's next? They're going to steal the golf course here too? They're going to sue again and take Old Country Meadows golf course and restaurant over? Why not steal this golf course too? I thought the whole point of paying $32 billion a year to First Nations was for this exact sort of situation. And by the way, when Justin Trudeau came into power, only $11 billion per year was being given to First Nations by Stephen Harper and the Conservative government. The Liberals tripled that number. So have we not paid enough, or do Canadians' houses and businesses need to be stolen now? We had BC Conservative leader John Rustad weighing in on this. Private property rights are fundamental to our democracy in our country. Any decision that attacks our private property rights needs to be appealed and overturned. Indigenous title and private property rights cannot coexist, overlap one another. That is what's happened here. We have private landowners of all those condos and all those businesses, and now technically First Nations owns those, and that has to be recognized if you're selling that stuff to someone else. No one wants to buy into this crap show, so these people are now screwed. Losing private property rights on your own home, your land, and undermining the right that underpin our country is wrong. Reconciliation cannot be achieved by taking rights away from one group and giving them to another. You know what I'm seeing in comments and multiple different posts on this? The W word. W-A-R. People want to have a W-A-R over this situation. And the sad fact of this is going to piss off Canadians so bad to absolutely despise First Nations when probably most First Nations had nothing to do with this. Couple people at the top, really greedy, probably some of these corrupt Indian chiefs who get all this money from taxpayers stuffing their pockets. Meanwhile, their bands don't get clean drinking water, basic roads, and all these other problems we see across the country. This system has to end. No more money to First Nations. Every Canadian gets treated equal. Canadians are not going to respond to this very positively. Moving ahead here, if that wasn't enough, we've got U.S. softwood lumber tariffs have exploded. Donald Trump is cranking this up. How much more can Canadians take?
Okay, now to the ongoing trade war with the U.S. As expected, the White House has announced an increase on duties to Canadian softwood lumber. Michelle Gassoub is following the very latest for us. So, Michelle, I saw these numbers. This is what we thought was going to happen, but it is official now.
It is official, and it's not just an increase, it is actually a doubling of those numbers. So let's take you through exactly what the softwood lumber industry in Canada is going to be faced with. 6.74%. Going up to 14.63%. That is on top of previously announced duties, now set at 20.56%, bringing us to a total of 35.19%. As Sarah, you said there, this was expected. We have seen these numbers before, but today we did get final confirmation, and these could be in place as early as next week. So,
with tariffs like that, American companies aren't going to buy Canadian lumber. Who wants to pay 35% more for a board of lumber?
BC's Minister of Forests very quickly called these absurd and reckless. Take a listen to some of what he had to say earlier today.
I think Donald Trump needs to recognize, and also all of the elected people in the United States of America need to recognize that while this is attacking hardworking forestry workers in Canada, this is also going to make it next to impossible for Americans, middle-class Americans, to build their homes. We all recognize with the talk of tariffs these last number of months, the real people that pay for tariffs are consumers, and consumers in the United States who want to build a home, or some of the folks that I've met over the last number of months who lost everything in California to wildfires, to hurricanes in North Carolina, they're going to be paying out of pocket.
Now, BC's Council of Forest Industries also very quickly responding this, issuing a statement that we have here saying these unjustified actions continue to harm workers, families, and communities on both sides of the border. To mitigate these harms, we must focus on what we can control, which is the competitiveness of the BC forestry industry within Canada. And this is obviously a big issue in BC, but also in Ontario. We also saw the Ontario Forest Industries Association expressing their concern, pointing to a report showing that the tariffs have added $6,000 to the cost of building a single-family home in the United States. So pointing out, Sarah, that these tariffs are hurting people on both sides of the borders, and not just the industries, but the people who are dependent on lumber to build homes and for their industries.
Yeah, and
The only people who are going to buy these are people who are desperate for wood. If it's a big company and they need a lot of wood and there's not enough in America, they'll buy it. But this is going to decimate Canada's lumber industry.
that's an argument that we've heard now, repeated over the last couple of weeks. And really interesting that the BC minister was sort of right and ready to give a response as soon as this happened, to the point that this was anticipated. They were at the ready. And to that also, earlier this week, the feds made a major announcement for softwood lumber for the industry in terms of supports.
Yeah, just a couple of days ago, we had the Prime Minister coming out announcing $1.2 billion in federal support for the industry, talking about the need to diversify this industry, retain workers, save jobs that were already being cut prior to tariffs being brought in. At the time, that just a couple of days ago, the industry saying they were feeling cautiously optimistic about this announcement. Take a listen to the Prime Minister just a couple of days ago.
We'll provide up to $700 million in loan guarantees. This will ensure that forestry companies of all sizes have the competitive financing they need to maintain and restructure, if necessary, their operations.
Was he going to give out money to every single sector that can't survive anymore? This is paid for by the taxpayers. This buffoon needs to make a deal. He's not going to make a deal, and he doesn't need to make one. His investments are in America. He's practically an American. We have an American running our country who doesn't care about us. He's going to bankrupt our country.
So, $1.2 billion poured into this industry at the same time, a doubling of tariffs. So an up and down week. We did know that these numbers were coming, but this is going to be just another challenge for an industry, Sarah, that is already facing so many.
Michelle, thank you.
What an absolute mess because Mark Carney couldn't make a deal. This is all because he couldn't make a deal. Now, the question is it because he couldn't make a deal or he didn't want to make a deal? So this guy's back in the news, Jeff Evely. This is unbelievable. So he intentionally went to the office responsible for handing out the fines in Nova Scotia, the $25,000 fines for going in the forest. He got the conservation officers to go with him and watch him, and he walked into the forest, and they handed him a fine for $28,872. Why is that? Because they had to add some sort of penalty and taxes?
Hey everybody, Jeff Evely here out in Nova Scotia, and as you can see behind me, this is the woods. But over here, this is not the woods.
So he goes in this building, and I should note this guy's a military vet, Canadian military vet. He served for a long time. Let's just give him a little recognition here. Retired Canadian military, Afghanistan, NORAD, Yemen, Iraq. Like, this guy served our country. So he goes in and starts having conversation with them.
Didn't have standing because I wasn't fined, so there was no money involved.
So he basically tells them, very politely, I'm going to go into the woods. Are you guys going to give me a fine? So then he goes back out. These guys are with him.
So
they're off
I'm
camera.
going to walk down here and go into these woods. I don't know that there's a good spot to do this.
The bushwhacks.
I'm just going to make this as painless as I can for those guys and go in here. And they have me on camera.
So they're watching him from out
As
there.
what? Walking in the woods. All right. Isn't this great? And maybe there's an easier way out of here than I came in. Let's try this. We good? Okay.
So he goes back in the building, and now they're going to give him a fine for going in the woods.
Summary offense ticket for today's date. Your information.
I thought it was 25,000. It's 28,872.
Costs, victim fees.
Taxes.
Oh, victim fees. Okay.
There's victim fees. This is so dumb. Our country is so dumb. Victim fees for him walking in the woods. That's like an extra $3,000.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks very much, gentlemen. I appreciate your courteous approach. Nice chatting.
If anyone even dared give me a ticket like that, I'd tell him to shove it where the sun don't shine. This guy's making a point, even says in this video, he's got a bone to pick with Tim Houston. So as you see in the comments here, Pleb saying set up a GoFundMe immediately. Everyone wants to GoFundMe to stick it to Tim Houston. Tim Houston is drunk with power. And he does in fact show the receipts there, $28,872. His court date is in September as well. Unsurprisingly, the woods did not spontaneously combust or burst into flames. So he's going to fight this in court and prove how stupid this whole thing is.